My name is Meredith Tobin. I am 68 years old, and 4 days after I buried my husband of 40 years, I found out I was never legally his wife. The town archivist called on a Tuesday morning. She said a man had walked in asking for Arthur's marriage record. She found two certificates, 2 different states, both still valid. I had never heard the man's name before that morning. I had never heard of the woman on the first certificate. I had been married to Arthur Tobin since June of 1986, and I had slept beside him every night for 4 decades. And I had raised 2 daughters with his last name. And none of it was legally real, but the marriage records were only the beginning. What I found inside a sealed letter and inside my brother-in-law's accounting firm made the room spin for a very different reason. Because the man who blackmailed my husband for 34 years wasn't a stranger. He sat at our Thanksgiving, he gave the eulogy at the memorial, and he was still extracting money from my family the week Arthur died. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, a channel where mothers share the moments that tested everything they believed and how they found their way through. If this one stays with you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Dorothy Yates called at 8:14 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the time because the coffee was still too hot to drink, and I was standing at the kitchen counter, staring at the mug Arthur had used every day for 20 years, a blue mug with a chipped handle. I hadn't washed it yet. Meredith, I need you to come into the archive this morning if you can. Dorothy is 61. She has run the town archive for 19 years. She does not call people at 8:14 in the morning for routine business. I drove 7 minutes from my driveway to the municipal building on Elm. The parking lot was mostly empty. Dorothy was waiting at the front desk with 2 documents laid side by side on a glass-top table. The first was yellowed, folded twice with crisp lines that told me it had lived in a filing cabinet for decades. Commonwealth of Virginia, Certificate of Marriage. Arthur David Tobin and Lorraine Marie Birch. April 14th, 1981. The second was white. I recognized it because I had held it on my wedding day. State of Connecticut Certificate of Marriage. Arthur David Tobin and Meredith Ann Farrell, June 7th, 1986. Both still active, Dorothy said. No record of dissolution for either one. I picked up the Virginia certificate first, held it at arm's length, the way I used to hold a book a student had returned with a torn cover, examining the damage before deciding what to do with it. Arthur was 25 in 1981. I did the math. He married Lorraine 5 years before he married me. My marriage was the second one. The law was simple. The first marriage holds. The second is void. I read my own marriage certificate like it belonged to someone else because legally it did. Dorothy sat across from me and folded her hands. She had the look she wore when delivering bad news at a town meeting. Steady eyes, measured breathing, no rush. A man came in yesterday afternoon, gave his name as Raymond Birch, 44, from Virginia. He asked for Arthur's marriage record specifically. Just one. He expected one. I pulled both. She described Raymond's reaction. He read the Virginia certificate quickly. He already knew it existed. When he saw the Connecticut one, he paused, and then he smiled. Not a happy smile. Dorothy said, "And now I have what I need" smile. Raymond left a business card on the counter before he walked out, not his own, an attorney's card. Paul Kirkland Esquire Estate and Probate Litigation Office in Hartford. Dorothy had not called me immediately. That was deliberate. She spent Monday night cross-referencing both certificates through the Interstate Vital Records system. She verified what I already knew from looking at the dates. The Virginia marriage predates yours by 5 years, Meredith. Under Connecticut law, your marriage is... She searched for a softer word. Void, I said. The word is void, Dorothy. She flinched. I did not. 32 years as a school librarian teaches you how to process information before you react to it. A child returns a book missing 3 chapters. You don't cry. You note the damage, file the report, and order a replacement. That was what my brain was doing. Cataloging, cross-referencing, noting the damage. The emotions would come later. For now, I needed to understand what Raymond Birch wanted and why he had driven from Virginia to a small Connecticut town 4 days after my husband's memorial. I drove home, pulled into the driveway, and sat there with the engine running for 11 minutes. I know, because the dashboard clock read 9:47 when I arrived and 9:58 when I turned the key. 40 years. June 7th, 1986, a Saturday. 40 guests in the garden behind Arthur's parents' house. His hands shook during the vows. I thought it was nerves. Everyone did. Nora came in, 1989, 8 pounds, 4 ounces. Arthur held her in the hospital corridor and wept. Claire followed in 1992, smaller, louder, already making her opinions known at 6 hours old. Arthur coached Little League from 1997 to 2006. He sat on the town finance committee for 12 years. He did tax returns until 10 o'clock on April nights, his reading glasses sliding down his nose, a pencil behind his ear, even though he used software. He was quiet, steady. He never came home late without calling. He never raised his voice at the girls. He mowed the lawn on Saturdays and read the paper on Sundays and died in his armchair on a Wednesday evening watching the 6 o'clock news. And none of it was legally real. The house. Our colonial on Birch Lane paid off in 2014, assessed at $520,000. His name and mine on the deed, except my name might not hold. If I was never his legal spouse, my claim to the property was a question, not an answer. $340,000 in retirement accounts, Social Security, survivorship benefits, a $200,000 life insurance policy, all of it tied to a marriage that, according to the state of Connecticut, did not exist. 6,000 dinners, 2 daughters, 1 mortgage, 40 years. And I was a footnote in somebody else's marriage. I replayed the memorial in my head. Saturday 3 days ago, 200 people in the church fellowship hall, folding chairs, coffee urns, the photograph of Arthur on an easel by the door, the one from his 60th birthday holding a fishing rod squinting into the sun. Glenn gave the eulogy, Arthur's older brother, 73, silver hair, combed back navy suit. He stood at the podium for 9 minutes and called Arthur the most reliable man I ever knew. That phrase sat differently now. Reliable to whom? Reliable because he never talked reliable because Glenn made sure of it. I remembered Glenn's eyes during the eulogy. His wife Barbara cried. Glenn's eyes were dry. At the time, I thought he was holding it together for the family. Now I wondered if dry eyes were just what a man looked like when the person who owed him money was finally gone. I kept replaying who else was there. Martin Weeks. I recognize the name now. 63. Gray beard. Wire-rimmed glasses. He signed the guest book and shook my hand and said, Arthur was a good man. I had assumed he was a Rotary friend and old client, but Martin Weeks was an estate and trust attorney. His firm was listed on the card he left with the guest book. I hadn't looked at it closely. Why would I? My husband had just died. I wasn't auditing the guest list. Now I was. I pulled out a notepad, a librarian habit. When the catalog doesn't make sense, you check the records. I wrote 3 columns, names, relationships, questions. Glenn was at the top of all 3. Wednesday evening. The doorbell rang at 6:15. Glenn stood on the porch with a casserole dish covered in foil. Barbara's chicken divan. He held it in both hands like an offering. How are you holding up? He said. I'm fine, Glenn. Thank you. He came inside, set the casserole on the kitchen counter, looked around the living room the way a man checks the property he's expecting to inherit. Anything I can help with paperwork? The firm, Arthur's accounts, just say the word. I hadn't told anyone about the certificates, not yet. I watched Glenn's eyes the way I used to watch a 6th grader who claimed he'd returned a book I knew he hadn't. Anyone been by? Glenn said. Any calls? Sometimes after a death, people come out of the woodwork. That question. Too specific. People come out of the woodwork. Just Dorothy from the archive, I said. Routine records question. Glenn's jaw tightened. The movement was small, a 1/4 inch, maybe less. But I had spent 32 years reading faces in a school library. Children lie with their mouths. Their jaws tell the truth. Well, Glenn said, if anyone contacts you about the firm client's vendors, anyone just refer them to me. Arthur would want that. He paused at the door. His hand rested on the frame. He looked back at me with an expression I couldn't read. Arthur should have handled some things while he was still here, but that's not your burden. He left. The casserole sat on the counter. I didn't touch it. I wrote Glenn's name in my notebook. Under the questions column, I wrote, "What does he know?" Since when? Thursday. I called Nora and Claire and asked them to come to the house. Nora arrived first. She is 37 and a pediatrician. She walked in, put her bag on the hallway bench and said, "What happened?" She didn't say hello. Doctors skip pleasantries when they hear a certain tone. Claire came 20 minutes later, 34, a high school English teacher. She brought flowers from the farmer's market because Claire brings something to every gathering, even when the gathering is a crisis. I sat them at the dining table. I placed both marriage certificates in front of them. The yellowed Virginia certificate on the left, the white Connecticut certificate on the right. Your father was married before me, I said in 1981, to a woman named Lorraine Birch. He never divorced her. Our marriage is legally void. Claire covered her mouth with both hands. Nora picked up the Virginia certificate and read every line. If the first marriage was 1981 and they separated by 1984, Nora said, Dad could have divorced her any time in those 2 years before he married you. Why didn't he? I don't know yet. Claire's voice cracked. Is our last name even real? Your last name is Tobin. That's real. Your father's silence doesn't change who you are. Claire cried. Nora did not. Nora was already 3 steps ahead, processing the implications the way she processed a set of labs that didn't match. What does Uncle Glenn know about this? Nora asked. That, I said, is what I'm going to find out. I want to pause here. If you've ever discovered a family secret that rewrote your entire history a lie older than your own children, you know what that Thursday felt like. Leave a comment. And if you haven't subscribed now is a good time, because what happened next changed everything. Friday morning, a certified letter arrived. The return address was a law office in Hartford. I signed for it at the door and carried it to the kitchen table. The envelope was addressed to Meredith Farrell, my maiden name, not Tobin. 40 years, erased in 1 line of ink. Paul Kirkland, attorney at law representing Raymond Birch on behalf of Lorraine Birch. Formerly, Lorraine Birch Tobin, legal surviving spouse of Arthur David Tobin. The letter was 3 pages single-spaced formal, the kind of document that uses words like hereby and pursuant and means every one of them. Raymond was contesting the estate. The claim listed everything the house on Birch Lane assessed at $520,000 retirement accounts, totaling $340,000. Life insurance policy, $200,000. Social Security survivorship benefits. Potential total, $1.1 million. All marital assets, the letter argued, should pass to the legal surviving spouse or her designated heir. I called a local attorney that afternoon, a woman named Janet Pryor, recommended by a friend from the library board. I read her the letter over the phone. Under Connecticut General Statute, Section 46B40, Janet said, if the first marriage was never dissolved, any subsequent marriage is void. You may have equitable claims, especially with 40 years of contributions, but you are not legally the surviving spouse. Equitable claims. It means a court might recognize your contributions, but it's not automatic. It's a fight. I thanked her, hung up, sat at the kitchen counter. Meredith Farrell. That was the name on the envelope. The name of a woman who existed before Arthur. The name I thought I'd left behind 40 years ago when I said I do in a garden and believed it meant something the law would honor. Saturday morning, 9:12. The phone rang and a voice I recognized from the guest book said, Mrs. Tobin Meredith. This is Martin Weeks, the attorney who was at the memorial. Yes. Arthur retained me 5 years ago. He gave me specific instructions. I was to contact you 30 days after his death. A pause. Given what I've learned about Mr. Birch's filing, I believe we should accelerate the timeline. You knew about the Virginia marriage. I knew everything Arthur chose to tell me, and what he chose to tell me was considerable. Martin explained. 5 years ago, Arthur had walked into his office and spent 2 hours laying out the situation. 2 marriages, no divorce from the first 40 years of silence, and a reason for the silence that Martin said I needed to hear from Arthur himself. He created a revocable trust. Martin said, "The Tobin family trust. Your house has been transferred into it. Retirement accounts are designated trust assets. You and your daughters are the beneficiaries." A trust. Trust assets do not pass through probate. They do not depend on marital status. Arthur structured this specifically so that if the first marriage ever surfaced, and he believed it would, your home and your retirement would be protected. My throat tightened. 5 years. Arthur had been planning for this for 5 years. He sat in that armchair every evening watching the news, knowing that someday a man named Raymond Birch would walk into a town archive and pull the thread that unraveled everything. "There's also a letter," Martin said. "Sealed for you only." Arthur wrote it himself. I have it in my office. A sealed letter from a dead man written in the handwriting I knew better than my own. "Monday morning." I said, "I'll be there." Martin's office was on the second floor of a converted Victorian on Main Street. Oak desk leather chairs, a window overlooking the town green. The kind of office where bad news arrives in cream envelopes with gold-embossed return addresses. He handed me the envelope. Cream. Heavy stock. Arthur's handwriting on the front. "Meredith, when you're ready." I recognized the slope of the M the way he crossed his T's with a long stroke almost like a dash. 40 years of birthday cards and grocery lists and notes left on the kitchen counter. Took the car and back by noon. Love, A. Martin offered to leave the room. I told him to stay. I needed a witness to whatever this was. I opened it. 2 pages, blue ink, Arthur's handwriting, careful no crossouts, written slowly. Page 1. Meredith, if you are reading this, then I am gone and the truth has arrived in whatever form it chose. I am sorry I could not deliver it myself. I tried more times than you will believe, and I failed every time. I married Lorraine Birch in Virginia in April of 1981. I was 25. She was 23. We were young and convinced that certainty was the same thing as love. We separated 3 years later. I should have filed for divorce. I didn't. I was careless, and then I was afraid. And then I met you. By the time I understood the full weight of what I had done, that I had married you without dissolving a prior marriage, that our life together rested on a document that had no legal standing. It was 1992, and by then Glenn knew. Page 1 ended there. I turned it over. Blank. I looked up at Martin. He nodded toward the second page. I went home. I sat in Arthur's armchair, the brown leather wingback by the window where he had watched the evening news every night, where he had died, and I read page 2. Page 2. Arthur's handwriting was smaller here, tighter, as if the words themselves were being compressed under weight. Glenn found the Virginia marriage certificate during the 1992 federal tax audit. Partnership filings required full disclosure of marital status. He pulled my personal records from the firm's shared cabinet, and there it was. He did not help me fix it. He sat me down in his office on a Tuesday afternoon in November and said, "If Meredith finds out, she leaves. If the state bar finds out, you lose your CPA license. If I report this, you're done. So here's what we're going to do." The terms Glenn would take 70% of the firm's profits. I would take 30. I would pay him $15,000 per year as a consulting fee to a company he would create. I would sign the building lease in my name alone. Glenn would carry no liability. I asked him what would happen if I refused. He said he would call you that evening. I couldn't divorce Lorraine. Filing the paperwork would make the bigamy public record. I couldn't tell you. I would lose you and Nora. Claire wasn't born yet, and everything we had built. I couldn't leave the firm. Glenn would tell everyone, so I stayed. I stayed for 34 years. I watched him take 70 cents of every dollar we earned together, and I wrote him a check every quarter, and I said nothing. I estimate Glenn took more than $1 million that should have been ours. I am sorry. I was never brave enough to burn it all down and start over. I never found a door Glenn didn't guard. I set the letter on my lap. The armchair smelled like Arthur. coffee and wool and the cedar chips he kept in the closet. The TV was off. The house was quiet. $1 million, 34 years, and the man who held the cage key had given the eulogy at the funeral and brought me a casserole on Wednesday. I read the letter 3 times. Then I did what librarians do when the information doesn't fit the existing record. I made a list. On a yellow legal pad, the same kind Arthur used during tax season, I drew 2 columns. Column A, what Arthur claimed. Column B, what can be verified 70-30 profit split since 1993. Verifiable through state business filings. Public record available at the Secretary of State's office or the county clerk. $15,000 per year in consulting fees. Verifiable through Arthur's personal tax returns, which Martin held as trustee. Building lease in Arthur's name only. Verifiable at the county recorder's office. Shell company called G. Tobin Consulting LLC. Verifiable through corporate filings. Every claim in Arthur's letter could be checked against paper that already existed in public archives. The kind of paper I had spent 32 years teaching children how to find. A library is just a building full of answers nobody has asked the right question about yet. I had said that to my students so many times it was printed on the bookmark we gave out at the end of each school year. I picked up the phone and called Dorothy. "I need help with some business filings," I said. "Partnership records, annual reports, county level. What years? 1993 through 2025. A pause. Dorothy understood what that range meant. 32 years of documents. A forensic timeline. "For you, Meredith, anything." I hung up and looked at Arthur's armchair. Empty. The dent in the leather cushion still held its shape. He'd sat there every evening with his secret for 4 decades, too afraid to speak, too trapped to leave. Janet Pryor had given me the legal diagnosis. Martin Weeks would build the case and I would find the evidence. I was done sitting. The formal filing arrived on Thursday. Paul Kirkland had moved fast. Probate Court, Litchfield County. Petition to contest estate of Arthur David Tobin. Filed by Raymond Birch as representative and sole heir of Lorraine Birch Tobin, legal surviving spouse. The petition requested an immediate injunction on all estate assets pending resolution. If the judge granted it everything, froze. I couldn't sell the house, couldn't access the retirement accounts, couldn't collect on the life insurance. Every dollar Arthur left behind would sit in legal limbo while lawyers billed by the hour. Martin Weeks filed a response the same day. His argument was clean. The house and retirement accounts were trust assets, not estate assets. The Tobin Family Trust was created 5 years ago, properly funded, properly documented. Trust law does not care about marital status. Trust law cares about the grantor's intent, and Arthur's intent was unambiguous. Paul Kirkland countered within 48 hours. His motion alleged that the trust was a deliberate instrument of fraud designed to circumvent the legitimate inheritance rights of the legal surviving spouse. Martin read me the filing over the phone. Fraud is a heavy word. They'll need to prove Arthur created the trust with the specific intent to defraud Lorraine. But he created it to protect you and the girls, not to deprive anyone. Can they drag this out 18 months, maybe 2 years? Litigation is a war of patience. I thought about the $200 per hour Janet Pryor had quoted. 2 years of legal fees could eat $150,000 or more. Even if I won, I'd lose. But something else bothered me. Paul Kirkland's filing included asset estimates that seemed high, not wildly so, but higher than what I'd expect from a first-pass assessment by an out-of-town attorney who'd never set foot in the firm. Someone was giving him numbers, someone who knew the firm from the inside. Dorothy delivered the records on a Friday afternoon. 2 bankers' boxes. 32 years of state filings for Tobin and Tobin certified public accountants. I cleared the dining table. The same table where I had shown Nora and Claire the 2 marriage certificates 4 days earlier. I laid the certificates on the left side, the yellowed Virginia document, and the white Connecticut one. Side by side, like before and after photographs of a life that had split in 2. Then I opened the boxes year by year, 1993 through 2025. Annual partnership reports filed with the Connecticut Secretary of State. profit allocation statements distribution records. Before 1992, 50-50, Arthur Tobin, 50%, Glenn Tobin, 50%. After 1992, 70-30. Glenn Tobin, 70%, Arthur Tobin, 30%. Every single year. 32 consecutive filings. Not one deviation. I pulled Arthur's personal tax returns from the folder Martin had provided. There they were, line by line. $15,000 per year paid to G. Tobin Consulting, LLC, paid quarterly. $3,750 in January, April. July and October. Like clockwork. I traced G. Tobin Consulting, LLC through the state corporate registry. Registered in 1993. Glenn Tobin, sole member. Business address, Glenn's home. No employees, no website, no clients listed other than Arthur. A pipe. A pipe that moved money from my husband's pocket to his brother's. Every quarter for 33 years. I pulled the building lease from county records. The firm's office at 114 Prospect Street. Lessor Prospect Properties, LLC. Lessee, Arthur D. Tobin individually. Not Tobin and Tobin. Not the partnership. Arthur alone. If the lease defaulted, Arthur was liable. Glenn walked clean. I photographed every page, labeled every folder. Blue for profit splits, green for consulting fees, yellow for the building lease. $1,005,000. That was the total. $1 million my husband earned and his brother took because Arthur couldn't say one sentence out loud. A library is just a building full of answers. I had found mine. I needed to see Glenn's face when I asked. The following Monday, I drove to the firm 11 minutes from my house. I had driven that route hundreds of times to drop off Arthur's forgotten lunch or pick up a tax document. The building was a 2-story brick on Prospect Street with a parking lot for 6 cars. Glenn's Cadillac was in its usual spot. I told the receptionist, Helen 60 been there 15 years, that I wanted to collect Arthur's personal things from his desk. A box of items, photos, a desk calendar, the blue coffee mug he kept at the office. Glenn came out of his office, gray slacks, white shirt sleeves rolled, the concerned brother-in-law. Meredith, good to see you. Take whatever you need. I packed the box slowly. While I was placing the desk calendar inside, I said, Arthur always told me the firm split was fair, 50-50, equal partners. Of course, Glenn said. Always was. The state filings show 70-30 since 1993. Did something change? Glenn's face went through a color I had never seen on a living person. Not red, not white. Something between. A great pink that started at his collar and moved upward. That was a restructuring, he said. Arthur agreed to it. He took less because he carried fewer clients. Standard practice. For 32 consecutive years. Meredith, his voice dropped. You're grieving. Don't start digging into things you don't understand. Don't start digging. A librarian told not to look something up. I picked up the box, walked to the door, turned back. Thank you for the casserole, Glenn. Barbara's recipe. Barbara's, he confirmed. Give her my best. I left. In the parking lot, I sat in the car and wrote in my notebook. He lied about the split without blinking. He only hesitated when I gave him a number. A librarian told not to dig is a librarian who knows exactly where to look next. The consulting fee trail was the simplest thread to follow because Glenn had been lazy about hiding it. Martin provided Arthur's complete personal tax returns for the past 10 years. I requested the remaining 23 years from the IRS using the trust's authority. Martin filed the paperwork as trustee, but I didn't need to wait. The 10 years I had were enough to establish the pattern. $15,000 per year, 4 quarterly payments, every check drawn on Arthur's personal account. Every payment coded as professional consulting services. Every dollar deposited into G. Tobin Consulting, LLC, which existed on paper at Glenn's home address and nowhere else in the physical world. Nora came over on Tuesday evening. She sat at the dining table with me, her reading glasses on her doctor's posture, spine straight, chin up the way she sat when reviewing a complicated chart. Mom, this is extortion. This is criminal. It's complicated. Your father agreed to it. Under duress. Yes, but he agreed. Under duress means it's not voluntary. That's coercion, and proving coercion requires evidence that isn't a letter from a dead man. Martin had been clearer about the path forward. The agreement was coerced, he said during a phone call earlier that day. That makes it voidable, and Glenn's failure to disclose the consulting arrangement to the partnership's clients may constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. The Connecticut State Board of Accountancy would be very interested in a CPA who ran a shell company that siphoned money from his own firm for 33 years. Glenn's professional license, his standing on the town finance committee, his reputation as the honest brother, all of it rested on the assumption that nobody would ever pull the filings and line them up year by year. Nobody ever had. Until a retired librarian sat down with 2 banker's boxes and a yellow legal pad. 2 weeks after the original filing, Paul Kirkland submitted an amended claim. The estate valuation had changed. Original letter $1.1 million. Amended filing $2.1 million. The extra million came from somewhere. Martin flagged it immediately. The amended claim values the firm's commercial property at $600,000. The county assessor's office has it at $280,000. They're listing the firm's goodwill at $400,000. A 2-person CPA firm in a town of 12,000 has $400,000 in transferable goodwill. It does not? Someone has given Kirkland inflated numbers. Someone who knows the firm's internal finances. I didn't say Glenn's name. I didn't need to. Martin said it for me. The question is, why would Glenn Tobin help the opposing party inflate a claim against his own sister-in-law? The answer was arithmetic. If Raymond's estate contest succeeded and forced a liquidation of assets, the firm's building and client list would go to auction. Glenn, the surviving partner, the one whose name was on nothing, could buy those assets at a discounted price through a third party, reestablish the practice under a new name, keep his income stream, keep his clients. Glenn wasn't helping Raymond out of generosity. Glenn was positioning himself to buy the wreckage. Can we prove it? I asked. Not yet. We'd need a direct connection between Glenn and Kirkland's office, a meeting, a phone call, something documented. I thought of Glenn's desk at the office, the one I'd stood next to while packing Arthur's box, the papers, the folders, the scattered receipts. A receipt. I hadn't been looking for one at the time, but now I was. Martin, I said, I need to go back to the firm one more time. There's something I missed. I returned to the firm on Thursday, told Helen I'd forgotten a framed photograph in Arthur's bottom drawer. She waved me back. Arthur's office was untouched, dust on the desk, the empty mug ring where his blue cup had been. I opened the bottom drawer, took out a frame I had planted there 2 days earlier, a photo of Nora's medical school graduation, and tucked it under my arm. Then I walked past Glenn's open door. He was on a phone call facing the window, his back to me. His desk was messier than I'd ever seen it. Papers stacked unevenly, 2 coffee cups folders half open. A man under pressure stops organizing. I glanced at his desk for 3 seconds. There it was, a credit card receipt from Vinny's Bistro downtown. The date was printed at the top last Tuesday. 2 entrees, 1 appetizer, 2 glasses of wine, total $147.62. On the customer copy in Glenn's handwriting, a note, PK, Estate MTG, PK Paul Kirkland. I took my phone out. 1 photograph receipt centered in the frame. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked out. Found it, I said to Helen, holding up the picture frame. Oh, that's a lovely one of Nora. It is. In the car, I enlarged the photograph on my phone. The date was clear. The handwriting was Glenn's. I had seen his handwriting on partnership documents for 40 years, and the note confirmed PK estate meeting. Glenn had dinner with Raymond's attorney 2 days before the amended filing with inflated numbers. The 2 marriage certificates were in my bag. I laid them on the passenger seat next to the phone, showing the receipt. The yellowed Virginia certificate, the white Connecticut one. And now a $147 dinner receipt that connected my brother-in-law to the man trying to take my house. Glenn wasn't watching from the sidelines. He was playing the game. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who smiled at your dinner table, you know what I was feeling. Stay with me. What happened at the town meeting is coming. Dorothy called me that evening. The town finance committee meets next Thursday, she said. Glenn is presenting the annual financial report for the firm. He does it every year. Reviews the municipal accounts. His firm handles 3 of them. I know the meeting. Arthur used to attend. Meredith, this is a public meeting. Public comment period at the end. Anyone can speak. Anyone can present documents. She let the silence do the work. I'm not ambushing him, Dorothy. No, you're attending a public meeting and exercising your right to participate in the public comment period. The committee oversees municipal funds. Glenn handles municipal funds. If there are questions about how he manages money, that committee is exactly the right audience. She was right. A private confrontation would give Glenn room to deny delay and lawyer up. He would turn it into a he said, she said. He was good at that. 34 years of practice. But a public meeting with committee members who trusted Glenn with their town's money, with business owners who were his clients, with residents who called him by his first name at the hardware store, that was different. In public, the numbers spoke for themselves. I thought about Arthur, about the cage Glenn had built around him, a cage made of silence and shame and quarterly payments. Arthur had lived in that cage for 34 years because he believed the only exit was destruction. I was not going to build another cage. I was going to open the door in front of witnesses. Thursday, I said. I'll be there, Dorothy said. I can authenticate every document I pulled from the county archives. If anyone questions the source, I'm the source. A town archivist and a school librarian, 2 women who spent their careers organizing the truth. Glenn called me on Sunday, suggested coffee. Family should handle this as family, he said. We met at the diner on Route 7. He was already seated when I arrived back to the wall facing the door. A man who chose his position before the conversation started. I've been thinking about the situation, Glenn said. Raymond Birch, the estate claim. It's messy and expensive. It is. Here's what I'm proposing. Let Raymond have the life insurance and a portion of the retirement. You keep the house through the trust. Everybody walks away. No court, no publicity. Why would I give anything to a man I've never met? Because a court fight will cost you $200,000 in legal fees and take 2 years. Arthur wouldn't have wanted that. What Arthur wanted stopped mattering when I found out he wasn't legally my husband. Glenn studied me. I held his gaze. He shifted his coffee cup a 1/4 inch to the left. Another tell. Meredith let this go. You don't want to open boxes you can't close. Open boxes. He was telling a librarian not to open boxes. He leaned forward, lowered his voice. The diner was half full. 7 other tables, a waitress named Donna who knew everyone. Arthur should have handled this. It's not my fault he was a coward. There it was. The sentence from the letter. The same logic, the same deflection. Arthur was the problem. Glenn was the bystander. 34 years of bleeding his brother dry, and Glenn still believed the fault belonged to the man who was afraid to speak. I memorized the sentence. Every word. The tone. The slight emphasis on coward. Thank you for the coffee, Glenn. I left a $50 bill on the table and walked out. I did not look back. Nora went to the firm on Monday. She did not tell me beforehand. She told me after. I asked him directly, she said. I said, Uncle Glenn, did you know about Dad's first marriage? Me? What did he say? He said he learned about it when we all did after Dad passed. He's lying, I know, so I pushed. Nora sat at my kitchen counter with a glass of water she wasn't drinking. I told him the profit split changed in 1993, the same year a tax audit would have surfaced Dad's marital records. I asked if that was a coincidence, and his mask slipped. Just for a second. Then he said Dad took a reduced role for 32 consecutive years. What was the slip? His hands started shaking. He put them flat on the desk to stop it. A doctor notices things like that. Nora paused. Then he said one thing that was almost human. He said, "I built that firm. I brought in every major client. Your father was a good bookkeeper, but I was the rainmaker." The split reflected reality. Did you believe him? About the rainmaking partially. Glenn was always the one shaking hands at the Chamber of Commerce. Dad was always the one doing the actual work. She looked at me. But being a rainmaker doesn't justify blackmail. A pediatrician who brings in more patients doesn't get to steal from the one who treats them. Glenn knew we were circling. He could feel the walls closing. A man who had spent 34 years controlling the information was watching it slip out of his hands, document by document, question by question. And the finance committee meeting was 3 days away. Tuesday evening, my dining table looked like a research desk at the end of a semester. Folders, documents, sticky notes, a color coding system that would have made my library science professor weep with pride. Red folder 2, marriage certificates and the void marriage legal analysis Janet Pryor had prepared. Blue folder, 32 years of partnership profit distributions, each one showing 70 to 30 in Glenn's favor. Green folder G, Tobin Consulting, LLC. Corporate filings and 33 years of $15,000 annual payments from Arthur's personal account. Yellow folder building lease at 114 Prospect Street. Arthur's name only. Black folder restaurant receipt from Vinny's Bistro. Glenn's handwriting, noting PK Air estate meeting, plus the timeline showing the amended filing 2 days later with inflated numbers. White folder. Arthur's trust documents, Martin's certification letter, and the sealed letter. 6 folders. 34 years, $1 million. And a brother who charged rent on a cage. Martin came to the house that evening to review everything. He sat at the table for 90 minutes reading each document, checking dates, cross-referencing numbers. When he finished, he took off his glasses and set them on the white folder. "This is comprehensive," he said. "The trust protects your assets. The financial records demonstrate a sustained pattern of extraction under coercion. And the collusion evidence, the receipt combined with the timing of the amended filing, gives us grounds to report Kirkland to the bar and Glenn to the CPA board." "I don't want to report quietly," I said. "Glenn has presented himself to this town as a trustworthy financial steward for 40 years. The people whose money he manages deserve to see who he actually is." Martin looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Then we do it at the meeting. Publicly. Wednesday night. The house was quiet. I sat in Arthur's armchair. The leather was cold. Nobody had sat in it since Monday when I'd read the letter. The dent in the cushion was still his shape. The floor lamp angled the way he'd liked it, tilted left to avoid glare on the television screen. The TV was off. I could handle this privately. File the complaints with the CPA board and the Bar Association. Let attorneys fight in conference rooms for 18 months. Keep the whole thing sealed inside courtrooms and legal filings that nobody in town would ever read. Or I could attend a public meeting where Glenn Tobin would stand behind a podium and tell a room full of people that he was a reliable financial steward. And I could correct the record. Claire called at 9 o'clock. "Mom, are you sure about tomorrow? Once you do this, everyone in town will know about Dad. Everyone in town already trusts Glenn with their money. They deserve to know what he did with ours. What about Dad's reputation? Your father's reputation is already complicated, sweetheart. The question is whether Glenn stays clean." Silence on the line. Then Claire. "I'll be there. Front row. Nora, too. She texted me an hour ago. She said I took the day off." I set the phone down on the armrest, looked at the empty chair across from me, the one Claire used to sit in when she'd read aloud from her English homework while Arthur pretended to watch the news, but was actually listening to every word. Arthur sat in this chair for 40 years with his secret, silent trapped, waiting for a door that never opened. I was done waiting. Thursday morning I woke at 5:30, made coffee, ironed the gray wool blazer that hung in the back of my closet, the one Arthur used to compliment. "You look like a senator," he'd say, which was his way of saying, I looked like someone who belonged in a room where decisions were made. Martin arrived at 10 o'clock with his briefcase. He spread 3 documents on the dining table, a cease and desist letter addressed to Glenn, a formal complaint draft for the Connecticut State Board of Accountancy, and an ethics referral for Paul Kirkland to the Connecticut Bar Association. When you speak during public comment, Martin said, stick to fact states, numbers, documents. Don't editorialize, don't characterize, let the evidence do the talking. I've been a librarian for 32 years, Martin. I know how to cite my sources. He almost smiled. At 4 o'clock, Nora called. I'm leaving the hospital now. I'll pick up Claire. At 5:30, Dorothy texted, I have certified copies of every county document. If anyone questions the source, I am the source. At 6:15, I put on the gray blazer, picked up the canvas bag, 6 color-coded folders in order, each one tabbed. I checked myself in the hallway mirror. Gray blazer, white blouse, dark slacks, no jewelry except my wedding band. I looked at the ring, a gold band Arthur had placed on my finger in June of 1986 in a garden ceremony that the state of Connecticut did not recognize. I left it on. I drove to town hall. The parking lot was filling up. Glenn's Cadillac was already in the first row. The meeting started at 7 o'clock. 6 folders, 1 canvas bag, and 40 years of questions that were about to become public answers. Town hall, the meeting room on the 2nd floor, long table at the front, 5 committee members, nameplates, water pitchers, a projector screen, an American flag in the corner, fluorescent lights that hummed when the room was quiet, about 60 people. Business owners, retirees, a reporter from the weekly paper who covered municipal meetings, the way some people covered sports with loyalty but low expectations. Glenn stood at the podium reading, glasses on, a navy blazer and a striped tie. He had a slide presentation queued on his laptop, charts, graphs, numbers. The performance of competence. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. As you know, Tobin & Tobin has been honored to serve as the financial steward of 3 municipal accounts for the past 27 years. Tonight, I'm pleased to present our annual review. I was in the 3rd row, gray blazer, canvas bag on my lap, Nora to my left in her doctor's posture, Claire to my right, hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white. Glenn saw me a flicker behind his glasses. Then he turned back to the screen and clicked to the first slide. I looked over my shoulder at the back row. There was Raymond Birch navy suit jacket, arms crossed, tight jaw. He looked like a man waiting for a verdict he expected to win. He did not look like a man who knew he had been lied to. Glenn continued. Revenue expenditures, audit, compliance, fiscal responsibility is not just a professional obligation, it is a personal one. The committee chair, Ed Watkins, 70 retired judge, nodded and said, Thank you, Glenn. Very thorough as always. He looked at the audience. We'll now open the floor to public comment. I stood. My name is Meredith Tobin. I walked to the microphone stand in the center aisle. My husband Arthur was Glenn's business partner for 41 years. He passed away 4 weeks ago. Ed Watkins nodded. We were sorry to hear about Arthur. Go ahead, Meredith. 3 weeks ago, I learned that my 40-year marriage to Arthur was legally void. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. A woman in the 2nd row put down her phone. Arthur was previously married in the Commonwealth of Virginia in 1981. That marriage was never dissolved. Under Connecticut law, my marriage to Arthur has no legal standing. I held up both certificates, the yellowed Virginia document in my left hand, the white Connecticut one in my right, side by side. The room could see the difference in color and age. I also learned that Arthur, 5 years before his death, created a revocable trust to protect our home and our daughter's inheritance. He created it because he knew this day would come. I held up the sealed letter, cream envelope, Arthur's handwriting. My husband left me this letter to be delivered after his death. In it, he explained why he never told me about the first marriage and why he couldn't. I read one line aloud. Arthur's handwriting. Arthur's words. Arthur's voice from beyond a grave that was still fresh. I never found a door Glenn didn't guard. The room went still. Glenn's hands were on the podium. His knuckles were white. His mouth was a straight line. Martin Weeks stood from his seat in the 2nd row. My name is Martin Weeks. I am the trustee of the Tobin Family Trust. I can confirm the trust's validity and my role in its creation 5 years ago at Arthur Tobin's explicit instruction." Ed Watkins leaned forward. "Glenn, do you have a response?" Glenn opened his mouth. "I did not give him the chance. In 1992, I said a federal tax audit required full disclosure of Arthur's marital status." Glenn discovered the Virginia marriage. Rather than help his brother resolve it, Glenn used it as leverage. Sin. I opened the blue folder, held up the first page. Starting in 1993, the partnership profit distribution changed from 50-50 to 70-30 in Glenn's favor. I held up the next page and the next year by year. Here are the state filings, 32 years, everyone showing the same split. Committee members were leaning forward. Ed Watkins had his reading glasses on now. I opened the green folder. Glenn also created G. Tobin Consulting, LLC, a company with no employees, no office, and no clients other than Arthur. My husband paid $15,000 per year to this company for 33 years. That is $495,000. I set both folders on the table in front of the committee. Combined with the excess profit share, Glenn Tobin extracted approximately $1 million from his own brother over 34 years. "This is a family matter." Glenn's voice came from behind me. He had stepped out from behind the podium. "This has no place in a public. You just presented this firm's financial reports to a public committee," I said. I did not turn around. "The firm's integrity is a public matter." Arthur agreed to every one of those terms. Now I turned. Glenn's face was flushed. His tie was crooked. His reading glasses were in his hand, not on his face. He had pulled them off without noticing. "Under what conditions, Glenn? It was a business decision. You held a secret over your brother's head for 34 years. And you charged him for your silence." My voice was level. My hands were still. "You didn't protect your brother. You farmed him. For 34 years, you kept him in a cage he couldn't escape, and you charged him rent." The room was silent. Glenn's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I opened the black folder. "Last Tuesday," I said, "Glenn had dinner at Vinnie's Bistro with Paul Kirkland, the attorney representing Raymond Birch, in an estate contest against me and my daughters." I held up the receipt. Glenn's handwriting. 2 meals a note in Glenn's hand. PK estate meeting. 2 days later, Mr. Kirkland filed an amended claim valuing this firm's assets at over $2 million. I looked at Ed Watkins. The county assessor values the firm's commercial property at $280,000. Mr. Kirkland's filing lists it at $600,000. He also claims $400,000 in transferable goodwill for a 2-person CPA firm. Ed Watkins removed his glasses. He looked at Glenn the way a retired judge looks at a defendant who has just contradicted his own testimony. I turned to the back row. Raymond Birch was standing. His arms were no longer crossed. They hung at his sides. "Mr. Birch," I said, "did you know that the person inflating your claim, the person who told your attorney this estate was worth twice its actual value, was the same man who bled my husband dry for 34 years?" Raymond's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked at Glenn, then back at me. The verdict he'd expected to win was dissolving in real time. Glenn stepped forward. "I was trying to help both sides reach a fair Mr. Tobin." Ed Watkins tapped the table once, not a gavel of finger, but it carried the same weight. "I think we've heard enough. Please sit down." Martin Weeks stood again. "I have a formal complaint prepared for the Connecticut State Board of Accountancy and an ethics referral for Mr. Kirkland to the State Bar Association. Both will be filed tomorrow morning." Glenn sat. His hands were flat on the table in front of him, palms down, not moving. The meeting adjourned at 8:17. Ed Watkins announced that the committee would conduct a formal review of all accounts managed by Tobin and Tobin during the relevant period. Glenn left through the side door. He did not speak to anyone. Barbara was not there. In the lobby, Raymond Birch approached me. He walked slowly like a man crossing a floor he wasn't sure was solid. "He told me your estate was worth $2 million, Raymond said. "He said he was looking out for my mother's interests." Glenn looks out for Glenn's interests. Raymond stood there. His hands were in his jacket pockets. He was 44, and up close he looked like a man who had been angry for so long that the anger had become his posture. My mother waited 40 years for him to come back. His voice was quieter now, almost private. She never remarried. She just waited. I let the words sit. They deserved that. Your mother deserved better, I said. So did I. Arthur failed us both, but Glenn made sure we'd never find out in time to fix it. Raymond looked at the floor tile gray scuffed from decades of public meetings. I'll talk to my attorney about the amended filing. The numbers were wrong. He left. No handshake. No apology. But the inflated claim, the one Glenn had engineered to serve his own interests, would be withdrawn. And without those numbers, Raymond's case was a $1.1 million contest against a properly funded trust, weak, likely to fail. 72 hours. That was how long it took for the consequences to arrive. The Connecticut State Board of Accountancy opened a formal investigation into Glenn Tobin on Friday morning. His CPA license was suspended pending review. He could not sign tax returns, audit statements, or represent clients until the investigation concluded. By Monday, 3 municipal accounts had pulled their business from Tobin & Tobin. The town administrator called Martin to ask about transition procedures. 12 years of trust dissolved in a long weekend. Paul Kirkland received the ethics referral Tuesday. He withdrew as Raymond's counsel before the week was out. No attorney wants a bar complaint on his record over inflated numbers he should have verified. Raymond, through a new attorney, withdrew the amended estate claim. The original claim remained. $1.1 million against the trust. But without Glenn's fabricated valuations and without Kirkland's aggressive strategy, the case was thin. Martin expected dismissal within 6 months. The trust held. The house was mine. The retirement accounts were protected. The life insurance payout would be contested, but the original policy named me as beneficiary, and Martin was confident. Glenn called once, Tuesday evening. My phone rang, and his name appeared on the screen. I watched it ring 4 times and go to voicemail. He did not leave a message. Nora texted that night, "You okay?" I replied, "I'm accounting." She understood. The firm dissolved within 30 days. No clients, no partner. The building lease, the one Glenn had made Arthur sign alone, was now a trust asset. Martin transferred it into the trust's name. My civil attorney filed suit in Litchfield Superior Court. Unjust enrichment, breach of fiduciary duty. $1,050,000 in documented extraction plus punitive damages. The complaint was 47 pages long. Every page cited a number from a public document. Glenn retained a defense attorney from New Haven. The case would take months, possibly a year, but the facts were filed. The filings were public. And in a town of 12,000, public filings travel faster than the weekly newspaper. Barbara filed for legal separation in late July. She moved to their daughter's house in Massachusetts. I heard this from Dorothy, who heard it from the clerk's office, which is how news moves in small towns, through documents, not gossip. Glenn, 73, sat in his office at 114 Prospect Street alone. The nameplate on the door still read Tobin & Tobin. Nobody had changed it. Nobody would. I had the 2 marriage certificates framed side by side, matching frames. I hung them in the hallway between the living room and the kitchen, where I passed them every morning on my way to make coffee. Nora asked why. Because both are real, I said. Lorraine's marriage was real. Mine was real. The law says one thing, 40 years says another. Martin helped me write a letter to Lorraine's nursing home, not to Raymond, to Lorraine. 3 sentences. My name is Meredith. I didn't know about you until after Arthur died. I'm sorry for the years you waited. He failed both of us. I don't know if she read it. Advanced Parkinson's takes many things before it takes everything, but the letter was sent. And sending it was the point. I set one boundary. Glenn's name is not spoken in my house, not because I hate him, because the accounting is done. Every dollar traced, every document filed, every question answered. There is nothing left to say about a man who charged rent on a cage. A library taught me that the truth doesn't expire. It just waits on a shelf until someone checks it out. 6 months later, the trust was validated. Raymond's original claim was dismissed. The trust predated his mother's discovery, and its structure was sound. Lorraine's nursing home costs were addressed through a separate arrangement I offered voluntarily. Not from the estate, from my own decision, because Lorraine waited 40 years and waiting deserves something, even if the law said it didn't. The armchair is still by the window. I sit in it now. I read in the evenings library books because old habits survive everything, even the truth about the man who sat there before me. Arthur's chair, where he carried his secret for 40 years. I sit in it now with mine. That I understand why he couldn't speak, even if I will never fully forgive him for choosing silence over trust. The 2 certificates hang in the hallway, one yellowed, one white, both real. That's my story. 2 marriage certificates, 1 sealed letter, and a brother-in-law who learned that a librarian never stops looking. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.